De-dollarization is ramping up, and there's no better drive for it than Western sanctions, of course. The more Western states use economic coercion, the more motivation the global majority has to protect their economic sovereignty. That's just simple truth. In a landmark statement this week, which, by the way, I have already shared with my subscribers over on my Telegram, so make sure that you follow me there to stay updated, Russia's finance minister Anton Siluanov just announced that trade between Russia and China now takes place almost entirely outside Western currencies. According to Siluanov, 99.1% of settlements between the two nations are conducted in rubles and in yuan. And this shift, he said, allows Moscow and Beijing to bypass what he called unfriendly foreign infrastructure, which is, of course, a clear reference to the dollar and euro-based banking systems that once dominated their trade. Just a few years ago, you may recall this, nearly all payments between the two countries, between Russia and China, pass through Western banks using dollars and euros. But sanctions, political tensions, and financial restrictions have changed that landscape entirely. Today, funds no longer pass through Western-controlled institutions that could freeze or hold transactions at any given moment. Instead, the ruble and yuan now form the foundation of a bilateral financial partnership that's quietly redrawing the map of global trade. This milestone comes as Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin and Chinese Premier Li Qiang met in Hangzhou, China, to discuss deepening cooperation in energy and in industry. For both sides, the message is very, very clear, and the message is financial independence from the West isn't just a defensive measure anymore. It is now a strategic pillar of economic resilience. And it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Russia's move toward de-dollarization accelerated after February of 2022, when the Ukraine conflict triggered sweeping Western sanctions. In response, Moscow redirected its trade routes toward Asia. I've already discussed that Moscow orients now toward the East, not the West. And this is when China emerged as its largest trading partner and the primary buyer of Russian oil. Beijing began paying in yuan, and that enabled the two nations to find a path to bypass the dollar system altogether. Now, of course, this dynamic creates a significant dependence on China, so it might be to Russia's detriment in the long term. It does need to diversify, but that is a story for another video. Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak confirmed that 90 to 95% of Russia's trade with China and India now happens in local currencies. What's remarkable here is that, as Novak explained, the transformation happened automatically. It happened quite organically, in other words. It wasn't a planned revolution, it was a market adaptation. Sanctions actually forced companies to innovate, and the system evolved to sustain trade without relying on Western financial networks. So really, this is the best case scenario. The results are quite striking. Despite the pressure of sanctions, Russian energy exports remain quite steady. Oil and gas continue to flow eastward, and payments in yuan and rupees have allowed Moscow to effectively maintain crucial revenue streams. By the way, in a recent video, I explained how Russia plans to revolutionize global energy market. Definitely watch the video next if you would like to gain a deeper understanding of the role that energy plays in geopolitics these days. As Russia benefits from energy exports, its largest buyers, China and India, gain access to discounted energy supplies, which in turn strengthens their industrial competitiveness internationally. It is a mutually beneficial arrangement that's quietly shifting global power balances. This trend extends beyond Russia's immediate partners too. Across the BRICS alliance, there is a growing push to reduce dependence on the US dollar. Nations within ASEAN too and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization SCO are following suit. They are effectively seeking to insulate themselves from US-centric financial shocks and from its sanctions. The collective goal is not necessarily to destroy the dollar's dominance, but it is to ensure that no single nation wields disproportionate control over global money flows. de-dollarization represents more than just a change in payment systems. It is a philosophical shift, first and foremost. For nearly a century, the dollar has symbolized financial stability and global trust. As of 2024, it still accounts for about 59% of global foreign exchange reserves, which is far ahead any rival currency. But as countries like Russia and China demonstrate viable alternatives, that confidence in the dollar is beginning to diversify, and the longer the US continues to use its currency as a weapon, the weaker the US dollar will become over time as global demand for it declines. It's just simple. If we take a step back now and approach this topic from the perspective of the BRICS bloc, it becomes clear that BRICS' approach to de-dollarization is very pragmatic. It is not revolutionary. Rather than attempting to dethrone the dollar overnight, member nations are building parallel systems, and this is why it is going to succeed in the long term. China's cross-border interbank payment system now connects nearly 5,000 banks across 185 countries. It allows transactions in yuan without relying on SWIFT. Likewise, the BRICS-founded New Development Bank is increasing loans in local currencies, which is freeing borrowers from the volatility of dollar-denominated debt and also having to compromise on domestic policy making. Still, the path ahead isn't simple at all. Economic coordination among BRICS nations remains a challenge. Their systems, their currencies, and their political priorities vary widely, of course, because they're just a very diverse group of nations. India and Brazil maintain deep ties with Western economies, while China and Russia push for faster independence. Geopolitics adds further complexity here. As you can tell, the United States has made clear that any attempt to undermine the dollar's global role will meet economic resistance. We've seen that already. American policymakers have hinted at tariffs and sanctions for countries that deliberately bypass dollar-based systems. Well, for now, the threat might be a deterrent for some nations that are weighing the risks of joining the de-dollarization wave. But history shows that currency power always follows economic power. There's no other way around it. In the early 20th century, for example, the British pound dominated world finance, and it accounted for the majority of global reserves. By the mid-century, however, the US dollar replaced it, which served as a reflection of America's post-war industrial supremacy. As the USSR and Europe laid in ruins after World War II, the United States emerged as an economic powerhouse. But those currency shifts weren't sudden. They were very, very subtle. They were gradual. And today, with the Russian finance minister's announcement that I just walked you through, it is clear that we may be witnessing the first signs of a similar transition to multipolar finance. For Russia, the 99% milestone in ruble-yuan trade is more than a statistic, of course. It is a declaration of economic sovereignty and a symbol of the new financial alliances forming across Eurasia. For China, it is a strategic victory that accelerates the yuan's rise as an international currency. Together, their cooperation represents the practical foundation of a world where trade no longer moves solely through Washington, through London, or through Brussels, but through a wider, more diversified network of financial power. In the long run, this transformation will not only reshape how nations trade, but also how they think about money, about risk, and about power. The era of single currency dominance may be drawing to a close, and it is being replaced by a more complex, multipolar global economy, one where financial sovereignty is the ultimate prize.